Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore remote events. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator for Gibson's Bookstore, and I am very pleased, very excited on a scale of 1 to 25, paint by number Jesuses. I am at 25. I'm excited for this event. My favorite sales rep, we're not supposed to have favorites, but we do. My favorite sales rep sent me Mrs. Nash's Ashes, I think in January. And she said, Elizabeth, drop everything else you're reading and read this book. And I did, because she's never steered me wrong. And I loved it. It's absolutely hilarious. I was cackling out loud. I was enjoying it so much. And I'm so excited that we get to have this event with Sarah Adler for her debut and Mrs. Nash's Ashes, and even more excited that we get another one of my favorite rom-com writers, Sarah Hogle, joining her in conversation. Sarah has written You Deserve Each Other, Twice Shy. This is going to be an amazing event. Sarah squared, I was saying when I was booking it, and just I couldn't figure out how to put that in the publicity without like ruining the names, but I just wanted a Sarah squared event. This is going to be amazing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, you two.
Thank you so much for having us. This is so exciting to get to do.
All right, so I promised myself I wouldn't gush too much. I mean, I don't know any author that wants somebody to not gush, but I promised myself I would be chill and cool for this event. To our audience members, many of you have already read Mrs. Nash's Ashes. That's great. If we are collecting audience questions for answering later in the event, chuck them in the chat sidebar. To our audience members watching later, sorry you missed it, but I hope your question gets answered. Mrs. Nash's Ashes and You Deserve Each Other and Twice Shy are available from Gibson's Bookstore. Sarah, take it away.
I am so excited to get to meet you virtually in person.
Yeah, we like email sometimes, but last time I saw you virtually, you didn't see me because I was like an audience member in an event, so that would have been weird. And you had just given yourself bangs.
Oh God.
Right after you had advised me not to give myself bangs. And
I
yeah,
was right to have advised you to not do that.
Yeah, you had instantly regretted it, I think, and your hair is very long now, so I'm very happy that that has worked out for you.
These are my bangs from 2021 now. I'm never cutting it again because it just burns me. But anyway, I am on my reread. I'm like about this way. And I think the best thing about having a horrible goldfish memory is that I forget all of the jokes so I can laugh again the next time. And you're so funny. So to kick things off, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and then about the book if you can.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Adler. I wrote Mrs. Nash's Ashes. That's, I guess, probably why you're here. I am a debut author, so this is my first published book. I am a mom to a 5-year-old, and I really like baked goods. Like I routinely drive like half an hour away to this bakery that has really good chocolate croissants, and that's basically like who I am in a nutshell. Those like couple facts. Not too much else interesting going on there. There was the second part of the question I already forgot. Trying to remember
I'm just thinking about chocolate croissants now, because I mean, that's where I always am in my head too. Like looking up who will deliver cannoli to me. But okay, it was, yeah, tell us a little about the book.
Oh, right. That's okay. So Mrs. Nash's Ashes is a romantic comedy. It is about a woman on a mission to deliver 3 tablespoons of her elderly best friend's ashes to the woman she fell in love with during World War II. But flights are all grounded, and she's forced instead to road trip to Key West with her ex's grad school rival, and shenanigans ensue.
Okay, so where did you come up with that? Like, and I know that if you're not sick of that question yet, you are going to be like, I hate personally getting that question, but I love giving it. So what inspired Mrs. Nash's Ashes?
So it's two things, like very different things came together for it. So one of them was I was listening to the radio and there was an interview with a musician, and he was talking about how when his mother died, he took her remains on the road with him and would sprinkle a little bit of her ashes on every stage he played. And I couldn't stop thinking about it, like, because that's like a nice thing to do until you start to think of the logistics. And then it's like, wait a second, I have a lot of follow-up questions. Like, what do you do with the ashes afterwards? Does somebody have to vacuum them up? Do you like sweep them back into the urn and do it again next stop? Like, I was like constantly thinking about this, like in all of my free time, about what he was actually doing. And so that was like in the back of my head. And then at the same time, I was brainstorming my next manuscript because I had two that I'd written that didn't get me an agent. And I was like, okay, gotta move on to the next thing, like keep on swimming. And one of the things I like to do while brainstorming is I tend to think about classic films and like what they might look like updated. And so I was thinking a lot about It Happened One Night, which is like a super fun screwball comedy from 1934. And I was thinking, what would this look like contemporary? And I think I was in the shower because that's like where I get my best ideas. And suddenly I was like, wait, these things could go together somehow. And the story was born.
I love that. Did you ever find out what they did with the ashes on the stage?
No, I have a feeling he probably would not answer my emails if I tried. Like, he's a big deal.
I want to know.
Maybe one day I'll be famous enough to email this guy and just be like, hello, what did you do with your mother after you sprinkled her places?
So this is your third book then that you've written?
My third manuscript, yeah. And yeah, so the first one was like kind of bad. Well, it was pretty bad. It was more kind of serious women's fiction, but like I was really funny on accident a lot. And the second one was like more in the rom-com direction, but it didn't have a plot. And so by the time I got to the third one, agents were like starting to remember who I was. They were like, oh yeah, I remember you from last time. Like, that was a pretty funny book, even though it didn't have a plot. Like, I'll take a look at this one.
Plot. I mean,
yeah, so like it was kind of nice to have two under my belt because I learned a lot, and like people started to remember me and see like how much I'd progressed, and they were like, oh, that's nice. Like she's getting better at this.
okay. So Grumpy Sunshine, Forced Proximity, and Secret Star-Crossed Lovers are a few tropes in this book. What are your top favorite romance tropes?
Oh, it's so hard. And also, I tend to read historical a lot more for fun than I do contemporary, which is weird since I write contemporary. But and a lot of my favorite tropes, like to read, therefore, are not my favorite to write because like it's really hard to do some of the best historical tropes in contemporary. I mean, I really like Only One Bed. Like, I feel like that's kind of just top tier. Enemies to Lovers is super fun when it's done well. I haven't read a ton of them, but like Marriage or Relationship in Trouble / Second Chance, like in You Deserve Each Other, I feel like that is, when done right, is like really excellent. I don't know if I could ever write it well, but like I do love reading a good one.
I love the way you did Only One Bed. You really brought the big guns with that one. It's very satisfying.
In more ways than one.
So this is a two-part question. Do you enjoy making people cry? And two, how dare you?
I really don't. Like, I don't like emotions. Like, this is one of the reasons I had such trouble like writing a plot into a book, is because I don't like bad things to happen to my characters. I don't like bad things to happen to me. Like, I don't like feeling things if I can help it. The way I got through a lot of my life was just not. And it's only relatively recently that I was like, oh, actually, maybe that's not healthy. And so like when I was writing this, it was kind of like it was hard for me because I was like, I have to do it. Like, I have to be uncomfortable and just do it and like be like embrace the emotion of it. I didn't necessarily expect it would be quite as poignant as it seems to be for people. Like my husband, like every time he rereads, always cries at the same part. And we just listened to the audiobook, which was really wonderful, except the sex scene, which I cringed so hard inside my body because like Mara Wilson did such a good job, but I also was so uncomfortable by that. But the rest of it, really fantastic. And we got to that part that always makes him cry, and he's like sitting on the couch bawling, and I'm just like sitting there eating bread. Like I just had like a hunk of bread and was eating, and he's like, "What is wrong with you?" So yeah, how dare I think it was me trying to find a healthier relationship with my emotions and or like actually create a plot. And I'm very sorry about it, but like also it's very satisfying now that I know I can do that to hurt people a little bit, but hopefully make it better by the end.
Yeah, I mean it's a good hurt. Like, but I completely get what you're saying about emotions. I don't want to feel things either. I will avoid things that I know are going to make me sad. And sometimes they sneak up on you and I'm like, I'm so glad that I read that.
Yeah, I'm exactly like that. Like if something is going to affect me, I will avoid it. Until I am in like the right place. And sometimes that's never. But then again, like I have an anxiety disorder and that's kind of par for the course. So, you know, I got to do what I got to do to like not just be sad all the time.
I heard that. I just want love. So this is your debut. So for others soon to debut or like hope to and are curious, can we talk a little about what this experience has been like for you, what you've learned, and any advice you may have to pass on?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to people who have like just got book contracts or are going on sub or something, it's kind of weird for me to give advice because my situation was so like unusual, like best case scenario by the time I actually like with this book specifically. I mean, I had 2 manuscripts under my belt, 200 rejections on those. It wasn't like it was like an overnight success thing. But with this book, when I started querying agents, I got my first offer within a week, and then I had 6 total offers, so I got to like choose. And then we went on sub pretty quickly, and within a week I had an offer, and then we went to auction and I had 6 offers and I got to choose. And that's like one of those things where like you're not even prepared for it because it's so far-fetched. It's like this is not a thing that actually happens to people.
Yeah.
And so my imposter syndrome was like terrible. I was like, somebody's going to notice soon that I don't deserve this. It's all going to like end. I still feel that way a little. And yeah, so like unless somebody is in a similar situation to that, I feel weird giving them advice because it's like, yeah, like, you know, these are the problems I face. And they're like, that is not at all what I am dealing with, but thank you. And then like but like past that, I think the best advice I have for people is like learn early to give up some control, like, and learn that this book is becoming a product. Like it is not just your art anymore. Like it is a thing, like an object that is meant to be sold. And so sometimes what you want for like the cover, for the title, for things like that is not going to match up with what they think is best. And I was in like a weird situation with that too, where they tried to change my title twice and wound up keeping it both times. One was like as late as when pre-orders were about to go live. And we like went through like 20 iterations of my cover before they landed on one that they liked. And so like, if I had not been as attached to things, I think I could have handled that better. Like I was a mess during that whole thing. And now with the second book, I feel way chiller. So if you can magically jump to like second book vibes on your first book, you'll be happier, but I'm not sure that's possible. But yeah, like just figure out when to let go of like what is your ideal. Because like, I mean, I was like in the cover sketches, like changing colors on Photoshop, trying to like figure out. And it's like, by the time we were like done, I was so sick of it that I was like just crying every time I looked at it. I was like, I hate it. And then they wound up changing it again anyway. So like, just, you know, keep perspective, I guess, is my general thing for publishing in general. Just keep perspective.
I will say I like the cover that you ended up with and the title. What were the alternative titles, out of curiosity?
So the two like that were the most likely, the first time we had the conversation, the one that they had taken to the higher ups was Thanks for the Ride. The second time around, it was Return to Sender. And then both times they were like, actually, we're gonna keep it. And it's funny because I've gotten like really varied feedback. Like some people are like, I picked this up because of the title. And some people are like, once I got past the unfortunate title. So it seems like one of those things that maybe is hit or miss, but I think that it describes the book well, and I'm glad we kept it. Even though it was like a rough couple months while we were discussing it.
How do you form your characters? Are any of them inspired by real people?
So for Million Hollis, another thing I do in between projects is I try to like reset my brain by watching TV, which I don't do a lot otherwise. And so during that, I was rewatching the first season of New Girl, and I was really interested in the dynamic between Jess and Nick. And I was like, what if Jess was even weirder and Nick was even grumpier, but they still had this like automatic connection? And so like, in a way, it was like that kind of dynamic I was going for. But as far as like if they're based on anyone specific, no, I try not to do that because I feel like that gets really weird quickly. And I have trouble letting go of things. So like if I start with a person, then I will want everything to match that person. And I won't want to change any of their features or their personality. And that's like not fun fiction at that point. So I kind of try to not do that too much. I'll like find one picture maybe of somebody that like kind of inspires me, but I do not like face cast or anything like that because I just have trouble detaching from the reality then.
Yeah. Do your characters like ever change in your head what they look like?
I find it hard to kind of picture them fully. Like they exist in there, but like their features are not clearly defined. The closest I ever got was, you probably remember like before AI got really scary all of a sudden, there was just like an AI face generator that we were like making characters on like last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That was like the closest I ever got to like how I kind of imagined them. Because they were like not real people. I could like make them who I wanted them to be. But yeah, I have like kind of a general vibe of them in my head, and I have kind of like a general outline of their body or what they're wearing maybe, but not, I couldn't like sketch them beyond like the features I mentioned on page.
I love Nick and Jess.
They're so fun, especially in that first season, because like it's before Nick gets really silly, and it's like while Jess is still like a weirdo, like a real weirdo, and they're like, how are we gonna live together? And he doesn't get her and she doesn't get him, and they're like trying their best, and it's just, I don't know, it's a fun dynamic that I feel like kind of petered out the further you get into the series, where it was like still really funny, but it wasn't quite the same vibe.
Yeah. I love weirdos, and Jess gets an unreasonable amount of hate from the internet, in my opinion. But so there is a road trip in this book, and on your ideal road trip, if you could go anywhere and with anybody, what would you pick?
I've been thinking about this a lot lately because like my daughter's starting school in September, and I'm like, oh man, our ability to just like up and go places is going to really be hindered by a regular schedule. And so I'm like thinking, should we do a road trip? Should I do a road trip like by myself to go see like friends, book events, things like that? something I did with my grandparents as a kid and that I really want to do again is we road tripped up to Niagara Falls, the Canada side. And I don't know if I would like enjoy it as much, or like I think I would enjoy it really differently now, but I feel like that would be a really fun thing to do again. And I still remember enough of it to like recreate parts that I want to. And so I think that could be really fun. I also feel like just a cross country one is like a thing I would like to do. But that's like, you know, a big undertaking. I have friends who've done it like a couple times, but yeah, I'm not sure, especially if I brought my daughter, if I'd want to do cross country. And then like a southern road trip, just trying every barbecue place would be really cool, but I feel like that would get expensive very quickly.
I'd like to do a train somewhere.
Yes. Well, so originally this book was going to be a train, and then I was like, this is too much of a bottle book. Like, this is not going to work. They're going to have to get off the train. And but yeah, like Amtrak used to do a writer in residence program where they would like just let you ride the train and write for several days, weeks. And I really want them to reinstate that because that's kind of my dream. Like I feel like train travel is so soothing and conducive to writing, and I would really like to do that if anyone from Amtrak is watching this, please.
If like
give me money
that's back, let me know.
Yes. Yeah, trains are really cool, but they're just too predictable. That's the problem. The trains are too predictable. They go from A to Z, and they don't detour unless something goes very wrong. And so it's like, well, this is going to be a boring book if they're on a train.
Space Jesus, paint by numbers, Space Jesus. I would love to know how that entered your brain. I love it.
So I worked for a short time at the DC courts, and I had a colleague there who was talking about how he had inadvertently booked a really religious bed and breakfast, like on a trip with a friend, and they had like gotten there and everything was just like covered in crucifixes. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a little like intimidating and scary, but like, what if it was something like that, but like a little bit sillier? So like, I decided pictures of Jesus, and then I was like, paint by numbers Jesus, because in my head, in this world, that was Connie's pandemic hobby. She like got really into paint by numbers Jesuses. And so the Jesus in space one, I had like Googled like different paintings of Jesus, and I feel like that was one of them, or like something adjacent to it. And I was like, all right, I gotta use that. A few of the ones that I mentioned are real, and then some of the others are like me just extrapolating on those.
I am just explaining in the chat why I asked such a weird question, because I did not explain it. Just like, well, maybe my numbers Jesus.
Yeah, maybe Elizabeth, if Elizabeth is here, can like quickly summarize the paint by number Jesuses in the chat.
In the chat, all right, I'll just pop in there and yeah, but we're trying really hard. Someone in the chat is like, no spoilers, it's decor. Don't panic, it's not a spoiler.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not going to give anything away except just like a silly detail, which there's plenty to go around, don't worry.
So what does a writing session look like for you? Do you have any rituals? Are you a morning writer or a pantser, or what's going on?
So it used to be like, when I first started writing, I was a stay-at-home mom. And it was pre-pandemic. So like my husband would get home from work, I would hand the baby to him, and I would get in my car and go to the closest Starbucks, and I would just sit there for like 3 hours with an iced mocha and a ham and cheese like croissant thing. And I would just like write. I would like whip out like 3,000 words in a couple hours, just very focused, because I was like, this is the only time I get. I gotta really like get this down. And I was also like, I had all day to be thinking about what I had wanted to write. So I was really prepared to finally get it out. And then once this became my full-time job, which it did like after my book deal, we put my daughter in daycare because she also needed socialization at that point because she'd been home with us for a while. I suddenly like had a lot of time and found myself like not writing as well. So I've tried to keep to schedules, but it doesn't really work. So more like sometime throughout the day, I will sit down and I will try to write. Sometimes at home here in my office, sometimes I'll go out to a coffee shop. I'll usually write anywhere from 500 words to like 2,500 words, depending on how I'm feeling. And I'm not allowed to have ice mochas much anymore. So like I will have like an iced latte with Splenda and yeah, so it's kind of changed. I'm still pretty much a pantser, although like publishing requires a certain amount of structure before they'll say like, yeah, okay, go ahead. And so I do kind of have to have a vague idea of what's going to happen and how I'm getting there, which is kind of like a bummer for me, but I'm like learning to adjust. But I do this kind of loose outline in the early stages where it's pretty much dialogue of like what I'm imagining in my head for different scenes and a couple like kind of stage direction sort of things. It's really informal. I like jump around a lot in tense and POV, and I just kind of try to get what I'm seeing in my head out to use when I finally get to that scene later. So like occasionally I post on Instagram in my stories like little snippets of that. Like recently I had one where like they're having a very nice moment and then it just says music cuts to Smash Mouth. So that's like pretty much like what that looks like. Or like, and then they do sex. Like I don't really like have to, it's just notes to myself. So I'll do that for pretty much probably the first half of the book. And then I have like a little breakdown every time without fail where I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And I take a week or two off, reread from the beginning, and then find my way. And then I reach the end. So that's how I write, unstructured, sort of depressed, and doing my best. And also interspersed with a lot of checking my phone, which is like really something I have to stop because I feel like if I just stopped doing that, maybe I would be better at this.
Your structure sounds very familiar to me. And the phone checking, like I've written 10 sentences. That means I get to go check BuzzFeed for half an hour.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I have a notification. I might as well check that because like I don't have a sentence in my head right now. Oh no, it's 30 minutes later and it is time to pick up my daughter and I did 50 words today. But
when you're writing, do you like this time kind of warp for you and you forget other things?
yeah, it's interesting because it's like one of the few things that I do where that happens. And when I first became a stay-at-home mom, I had not planned on that. Like I had planned to keep working, but like things just became untenable. And so I had just finished my master's degree a month before my daughter was born. So I had like all of this education I wasn't using and was not working and was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because like being a stay-at-home mom was really wonderful, but it was not really like for me. I was not like, I can see myself doing this forever. And so I was like doing this weird workbook that I bought because I started buying self-help workbooks because that's the kind of place I was in. And it was like about like how to find your dream career. And it was like, write down the things that you love to do where time like warps and you forget about stuff. And I was like, I like to write and I like to do research. And they're like, all right, now be creative. What could you do with that? And I was like, nothing. No one will ever pay me to do either of those things. And like, I get paid to do those things now. So that workbook was magic and I highly recommend it. I don't know what the title was though. But yeah, it was like, that's apparently like a good thing that you get like when you find something that you get in the zone like that. So usually if I'm going to write and I have a meeting later, I have to set an alarm on my phone or else I'll just like constantly be worried I'll miss the meeting because I will just kind of forget about time.
Yeah. Let me see where I'm at here. My notes are horrible. What's your desert island book?
The book I reread the most is Welcome to Temptation by Jennifer Cruzy. I read it at least once a year. It's kind of my when I have my mid manuscript breakdown, that's usually what I do is I read that book and it kind of resets me. So I would say that, unless I can cheat and say a compilation of all my favorite books that I get custom made.
You just get like an anthology. It's this big.
Yeah, like it'll be like how they have in those libraries where it's like a big podium because the book is so large you can't hold it. It just has to stay on the podium on the island, and I just like go through it.
I've seen you talking about that book before.
Oh yeah, I talk about it all the time. I talk about it incessantly. It was written in 2000, and so like it's not as like current as one might hope, but like most of it holds up really, really well. The female protagonist is the daughter of like a family of con artists. The male protagonist is like a playboy mayor of the town, and it's just, I don't know, there's like a murder happens, and they're filming a porno. It's just like it's a whole thing that goes really wild really fast, which is one of the things that I think Jennifer Cruzy does really well. Just lots of weird things happen.
Well, I need to put that on my TBR.
Yeah, I think you would like it. I think most people would like it if they like contemporary rom-coms. It's very funny.
So there's some music featured in your book, like Fleetwood Mac. I don't think it's too spoilery. Fleetwood Mac is in there. I love Fleetwood Mac. Favorite song, go?
I like Sarah for obvious reasons, although it doesn't have an H at the end, which bums me out.
Boo.
Boo, wrong, Sarah. But I feel like I hit a certain age and suddenly Landslide made sense to me, and I was just like crying in my car. Like I suddenly hit my Fleetwood Mac era and was like, oh, I get it now. Oddly enough, I was actually wearing a Fleetwood Mac shirt all day today, but then I got ramen on it, so I could not continue wearing it.
Let's see. Can you
wait a second?
us?
But in Twice Shy, you have a Fleetwood Mac reference.
Yes.
And I didn't catch it for the first read through, but the second read through I did. And you reference the song everywhere, and your description of it is like just perfect. Because once I caught it, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah. Anyway, I just felt the need to say that because I don't think I ever brought it up with you.
I love that song.
I like the Shaka Khan cover of it too. It's very good.
I have not heard that.
Shaka Khan is great.
Can you tell us about what's next for you? Any details?
Yeah, so I can't say a ton, but I have a second book scheduled currently for spring 2024. It is an enemies to lovers rom-com. There is a fake spirit medium, a hot farmer, and a ghost.
I want to know more.
Well, it started out as a Twitter joke, as most good things do. But I also just like couldn't stop thinking about it as a real thing after I made the joke. And so I actually had been working, I was like 20,000 into a different story, and I emailed our agent, because we have the same agent, and I was like, actually, can I switch this to this like very silly one? And she was like, that is ridiculous, go ahead.
Well, that sounds fun. You can put that in my inbox anytime.
Yes, it's about to go to copy edits, so I'm sure it will be reaching you soon.
Yay. Well, I think that's all my questions. Is there anything that you would like to tell people about this one?
Is there anything? Let's think. Just that I hope people enjoy it if you haven't read it yet, or even if you did, I hope you did enjoy it. I'm very grateful that this gets to be my debut. It's like one of those things where when your first manuscript doesn't sell, you feel like it's the end of the world. And then you're like actually very grateful later on that that was not your first book because it was not good. And I'm just glad that like this is the one that is in your hands because I'm very proud of it. And it took so many people to make it like physically. Like my whole team at Berkeley did such an incredible job, but also just like emotionally, like not just me, but like my family. And yeah, so like it was a labor of love, and like I feel very grateful to get to share it with everybody and make you laugh and make you cry maybe. And I hope I get to keep doing that on an ongoing basis.
Do you want to continue writing mostly contemporary?
Yeah, it's weird because like my background is in history and I love reading historical, but it's kind of an escapism thing for me. I have like a couple ideas that are more historical but still contemporary that my agent has said maybe let's not yet. Like maybe let's put that to the side, and I totally agree with her. I think it makes sense to kind of focus on contemporary, but it has not stopped me from like putting historical things into future projects. Like book 3, which is not sold yet, we're still working on the proposal, but if things go according to plan, it will have like oral history transcripts as part of it. So I'm very excited about that. That's been a lot of fun to play around with so far.
All right, I'm gonna swoop in. Sarah Hogle, do you have any last questions to ask before I steal everybody's attention? No?
My
come
mind
back.
is linked.
Yeah, I have never been asked a single question in my life. Yeah. So I'll ask my questions and the chat's questions. And when you think of it, I'm sure we will pop you back in. This has been a delightful chat. I'm so glad I saved the chat transcripts because we have been very chatty tonight. Let's see. First of all, you mentioned that you were eating bread while your husband sobbed, Sarah. And the chat and I agree that bread is a very good stand-in for emotions. So you both are, equally valid. There have been several comments. Robin particularly thanks you for representing anxiety so well. It was very well written on the page. And as we talk about anxiety, we're now going to go to how funny you are. You're funny. Congratulations. Jennifer says, your book is so funny. When you are writing, how do you balance the hilarity and the emotions so well? And have you had to cut funny scenes or lines during editing that you were sad to see go, even if it was for the best?
So I do struggle with that sometimes, but I also kind of trust my instincts on it. And so I did not cut that many lines because there were several that my editor thought I should. And I was like, no, actually, I'm going to keep it. Because like there were several where she's like, this is a very emotional moment. I think we could do without this joke. And I'm like, no, that's exactly where I want to joke. Because like I said, I don't love feeling things. And I feel like things are easier to get through with a joke thrown in. So I always want to do that where I can. And like I think the goofiest line in the whole book is Hollis is the shark towards the end. I was very surprised that my editor let me keep that one because it really is out of nowhere and just not really relevant to the moment. So no, I didn't cut that much because I'm very stubborn, and they made me instead cut a bunch of my F words. There were 53 and now there's 22. So I was like, I've cut enough.
I've found, and this is my professional, unqualified opinion, you can't teach humor. You're a naturally funny person or you're not. So congratulations. We've had several questions about how you craft such rich and well-developed characters, and Madison asked if you have a dream cast. You mentioned you don't like to attach your characters too firmly to real people, but can you talk about film rights? Like, I mean, a casting director would obviously cast this. The author, before Twitter gets mad, the author never casts a show or a movie. Have you sold film rights? Do you want to sell film rights? Would you ever want to see this on the screen?
I would love for this to become a film. I think officially last week started sending it out with my film agent, sent it to production companies. My understanding of that process is that it can take a very long time and there is a lot of silence. So I'm not sure what I'm sure the status of that after a week is nothing, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anyone will be interested. I'm not sure it translates super well with all of the they'd have to get a lot of rights to a lot of music or change it up quite a bit. But yeah, I would love to see it on the screen. And part of the reason I also don't face cast is just because I'm like really out of touch with current pop culture. Like I've been out of touch since probably 2004 and I've just never caught back up. And so like I don't really actually know who is currently acting in films. I'm like, oh, this person, and then they're like 55 now. So I will tell you like the unrealistic face cast or casting of this. Hollis's appearance is based on a very particular photograph of Robert Downey Jr. in the 80s, where he is smoking a cigarette, his hair is all mussed, and he has like glasses on. Okay. If you just Google like young Robert Downey Jr., you'll probably find it. So if he could play him, come back in time.
CGI.
Yeah, CGI him. That wouldn't be weird at all. And then for Millie, I don't is her name Karen Gillian? She was on Selfie. Yep. She's very great.
She was in Doctor Who, wasn't she?
What?
She was one of the companions in Doctor Who, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I never watched Doctor Who. I know. Maybe now that I've seen Howl's Moving Castle, I can move on to Doctor Who. So her or there's a very funny comedian, Eleanor Morton, who is very Scottish, but if she can get her American accent down, like I think she would be really fun as Millie. But yeah, so like if it ever sells for film, I hope they do not ask my opinion on this stuff because I have no idea.
Yeah. Many very popular authors who have significantly more star power, no offense, than you, are very, very clear. Like I believe John Green specifically was like, I am not involved in casting. It is not my skill set. I am not like, my skill set is writing. My skill set is not finding an actor and seeing how well they'll translate. Like that's someone's professional job. Do not attack authors for casting choices. I've heard other authors say as well that sometimes the rights will get purchased, you get money, and then nothing happens with it for years and years and years. And then someone else buys the rights or they might keep buying the rights just so that no one else gets to make it, which seems mean. But even if somebody does buy the rights, it might sit on it for years. People in the chat, by the way, are now furiously Googling young Robert Downey Jr. smoking, and some of us have found the picture, and I think we agree that is now how I also see Hollis. Yes, it's me. I was also going Googling. Let's see. Madison asks, what are some books that remind you of Mrs. Nash's Ashes? Book readers who enjoyed it might also enjoy some other books that inspire you or books that you love. Charlene said, I Loved You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. Which, by the way, I try and describe that book to people as, like an unhappily engaged couple tries to make the other one break it off. And I try and describe it to them and they're like, okay. And I'm like, you have to understand that I laughed so hard when she hides next to her car by just crouching. And they're like, that doesn't sound funny. I'm like, you have to be there, but you will like make choking bird noises laughing. It's so funny. So, what were some of your book read-alikes, book parallels? It's hard for, I think, perhaps the author to say my book is like this, but if there was a dream in the stars of what you would match your book up against, what might you be?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Sarah's books were like a huge influence on me. Well, like a huge influence, and also just like I feel a kinship with them. So like they inspired me, but also like I don't know, I feel like I just vibed with them regardless. So I would recommend any of her books to anybody, including the one that's going to come out next year, I think it is, right? Which I'm sure is going to be fantastic as well. When I queried, I got a lot of comparisons to Emily Henry, which is like very scary to me. It's like, that's a lot to live up to. So like, I do think Emily Henry, especially her first two books, have kind of similar vibes to what I do. I also got some like Sally Thorne comparisons, which, yeah, I think I'd agree with that too. And Carrie Winfrey is very funny. Her books are not as spicy as like her stuff is closed door, but she has a very similar kind of pop culture perspective as I do. There's a lot of older stuff in her stuff, and puns and fun jokes and really rich characters. And so I really, really love everything she's written too.
So if you were to convince your agent, I could write a historical next, what time period would you choose to set it in? You snuck in some historical with this one. It's World War II. Like there's two love stories being told at the same time in then and now, flashbacks, and and that's not a spoiler, don't worry. There's two love stories and one is historical. Where would you convince your agent to take you next?
So I have a project that's like my back pocket project that I kind of work on in between other projects when I don't really know what else to do. And that one it's a contemporary and historical together. That one's set in like 1906. And some of my other ideas are kind of 1890s to early 1900s. That's an area I started kind of researching towards the end of my master's degree, and I just kind of I like the aesthetic of it. I used to, for a short time, I was a docent at a historic house in DC called Heinrich House. That's like this old brewer from Germany created this like really gigantic mansion that's fireproof, and it was really cool. But I also have like a lot of experience being there, so I feel like I can write the period a little bit better than others. So yeah, probably like turn of the century US would be my sweet spot, I think.
Do it.
Do it. Yes. Make it funny. Make us cry. Give us, what did someone say in chat? Give us a cinnamon roll disguised as burnt toast, which is an excellent description. I think that might be our last question. So I guess what is Millie's go-to ice cream order?
Well, as you know, she tends to panic. So it's probably like something really weird that she didn't really want, but she'll eat it anyway. So probably like watermelon sorbet with like marshmallow topping. And she'd be like, surprisingly not bad, mostly just sweet. But if she had Hollis order for her, she'd probably want a banana split, and she would convince him to share it, and he would totally do it because he loves sweets.
Oh. Excellent. I approve. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, Sarah and Sarah, for our Sarah Squared event for Sarah Adler's Mrs. Nash's Ashes. If you are joining us later on YouTube, the book is available from Gibson's Bookstore. We are very pleased to mail it out to you. This chat has been one of the most chatty I've ever seen, which is delightful. Sarah Hogle, thank you for joining us tonight to join us in conversation. I can't wait to see what is next from the two of you. And I think that's about it. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.